Hey Year 11 and welcome to the next episode of Mathematical Mowbray Movies. I know you've been hanging out for this episode. You can see that the graphic design work's upgraded a little bit, so I hope you're enjoying that. And in this episode we're focusing on trigonometry, or more specifically, and here comes the corny joke for the episode, we're looking at, can you work it out? What's this a picture of? Soccer ball. What's this arrow pointing toward? A toe. And this is the letter A. So we're looking at soccer toa, otherwise known as soccer toa for the more mathematically inclined. All right, let's get straight into it. That's it for the corny jokes. I hope you coped with that one. Soccer toa. Hopefully you remember something about soccer toa from your junior years. In particular, hopefully you remember that it only applies to right angle triangles, and it is talking about the ratio of sides in those right angled triangles in relation to a particular angle that you're given. So there's three ratios that we look at. The first one is the S in soccer toa, and it stands for sine, or the cosine rule, which we write as sin or sin. And the sine rule tells us about the opposite side and the hypotenuse side. It tells us about the ratio of those two sides. So when I'm talking about the opposite side, let's check where we're labelling that on our triangle. Here's my angle. I'm always talking about these sides in relation to the angle. So the side opposite the angle would be this one. The hypotenuse, of course, we know from our Pythagoras' theorem stuff, is the longest side in the triangle. So I can write out that my sine ratio, remember it's always the sine of the angle, is equal to the opposite side, the length of the opposite side, divided by the hypotenuse of the length of the hypotenuse. My next ratio is cos. This time I've got an A, and that stands for adjacent. To be adjacent to something means just to be next to it. So when I'm talking about the adjacent side, or the side adjacent to the angle, I'm talking about the side that is next to the angle. Now the hypotenuse is next to the angle, but it can't be that one because it's already the hypotenuse. So we're talking about the side that is adjacent or next to the next to the angle that is not the hypotenuse. So it's this one here. So the ka bit in soccer toa says that cos of theta is equal to adjacent divided by hypotenuse. Then I've got my last ratio here, tan, or the tangent. Again, it's got the opposite side involved, and this time it's got the adjacent side involved. And this says that the tan of my angle is equal to the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. So you're going to need to remember soccer toa and remember how you translate this acronym into these rules here that you're going to be using throughout your work on trigonometry. So first things first, let's check that we can label triangles correctly with hypotenuse, opposite and adjacent. So that's a really important skill in trigonometry. So here's some triangles that we're just going to have a look at together. In this triangle you can see, of course it's a right angle triangle, you can see I've labelled this angle as theta. So I'd always go through and label the hypotenuse first because it's always the longest side, or the most obvious one. So this one's the hypotenuse here. My opposite side, the one opposite my angle, is this one here, which makes this one the adjacent, the one next to my angle. Let's have a look at this one. My longest side here is the hypotenuse. The side opposite my angle is this one. And then the one next to or adjacent to my angle is this one. This one down here, my hypotenuse is my longest one, or the one opposite the right angle, of course. The one opposite my angle is this one, and this one would then be my adjacent angle. Last one here, the hypotenuse is this longest side, the side opposite my angle is here, the side adjacent to my angle is here. So here is your first question that you need to have a go at. It says, which triangle is correctly labelled? So you need to choose the correctly labelled triangle. Have a go at that question. Alright, hopefully you correctly identified that the correctly labelled triangle was triangle C, since this was opposite. This is to the angle, this is my longest side, hypotenuse, and this one is adjacent to the angle, so this is the correct answer. The next thing that you need to be able to do is work out which of the ratios, sine, cos or tan, you're going to use when you're given a particular question. So to work that out, you need to look at what sides are involved. We know that we're using one of these ratios because we've got an angle involved and two sides, but which ratio do we use? So you need to go through, and the first thing you must do is label the sides that you're given. I'm given these two sides. The side that's got a length of 5, I can see that that's my hypotenuse. The side that's got a length of 4, I can see that that's my opposite. So now I look over at my ratios and I say, which one of these ratios involves opposite and hypotenuse? And I can see that it is the sine ratio. So for this, I'm going to use the sine ratio. And of course, if I wrote it out, it would be sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. This next one here, again, I label the sides that I'm interested in or that I'm given. So here, I've got my hypotenuse again, given to me as 10, and I'm trying to work out this one here, which is adjacent to my angle. So I'm trying to work out the adjacent side. So which of my rules involves adjacent and hypotenuse? The cos rule involves the adjacent and hypotenuse sides. So I'm going to use the cos rule here. I have a look at this one. Here's my angle here. So I need to look at how I'd label these two sides that I'm given. Well, this one is opposite my angle, so it's the opposite side. This one is adjacent, so it's the adjacent side. I look at my ratios, which one involves opposite and adjacent? It's this one here, the tan ratio. So I'd be using tan for this question. Last one here. Here's my angle. I can see that this is the hypotenuse, the longest side I've been given. This one here is the side that is adjacent to my angle, since that would be the opposite. So I'm looking for the ratio that involves adjacent and hypotenuse, which here would be the cos ratio. So now your second question for this video. You need to have a look and you need to identify in each of these three cases which ratio you need to use. Do you need to use sine? Do you need to use cos? And do you need to use tan? That takes you to the end of this video. Well done.